So, hello everyone, and welcome to our warm up webinar. I'm Lena Hansen, Vice President at Global Big Data Conference. So, we are excited to organize our upcoming workshops on vector databases, LLMs, and generative AI. So, today we have the pleasure of hearing from our excellent speaker, Brent Laster, founder of Tech Skills Transformations, who will provide more details about these workshops and the benefits you can gain by attending them. Hello, Brent. Good afternoon.
Hi, Lena.
So please introduce yourself and get us started with the warm up webinar.
Absolutely. And welcome everybody to our webinar today. Thank you for taking time out on a Friday afternoon to join us. Hope you're having a great day so far. Appreciate you again taking the time here to join us for this presentation. As Lena said, my name is Brent Laster. I have a training company called Tech Skills Transformations, and I'm excited to be partnering with Lena and Global Big Data Conference to be presenting a set of workshops, rather, live workshops on some generative AI topics. We're going to talk about three of these today. We've got others coming up, but we want to focus on these three today and just give you a little information about it. So hopefully you can see my slides okay, but what we'll do for our time together in the next 45 minutes is we're going to help you learn a little bit about the training. I'm going to talk to you about how we have the training organized, tell you about the courses, hopefully answer any questions you have, and if time allows, we'll have some demos about it. We're going to just introduce the things today, give you some information about it, so you can make a decision about whether or not you'd like to attend, whether it might be useful to you or colleagues or some other folks that you know. Here's some questions for you to think about as we're going through. What's your experience with Gen AI? And I'll start out by saying that on these workshops, I don't assume that you have any experience with generative AI. You don't have to coming in. I like to build up from the foundation pieces, and working our way up and helping people understand about it. But thinking about what's your experience with Gen AI, if you're like most people, you probably have encountered this in nearly every tool. It seems like every tool has some sort of generative AI assistant associated with it these days, and it is pervasive and everywhere. And thinking about what do you want to learn about it as you're we're going through our presentation here, maybe some topics that you see that you think of would be interesting to talk about, or other things that you'd like to see presentations on in the future or something, feel free to share those. Feel free to put any questions into the chat or such as well. We'll have some time at the end, I think, for Q&A as well. What have you not been able to find information on? Hopefully we can help you if you've been looking for information maybe about some of these buzzwords you've heard, like retrieval augmented generation or RAG or agent or those kinds of things. And overall, we wanted you to help you think about whether or not these courses would be useful to you. So real quickly about me, as Lena's already mentioned, I have a tech skills company, Tech Skills Transformations. There's some information on our website, information, and connect with me on email or reach out to us if you're interested, any kind of customized training or anything. I have a long career in corporate as well as, doing the writing and conferences and stuff. And have written a number of things on O'Reilly, a number of reports out there, smaller books, and also have a few books out on Amazon there. If you're interested, feel free to check those out. Also working on one right now with O'Reilly and GitHub called Learning GitHub Copilot. First few chapters are there to read for free on O'Reilly if you want to get a free trial or maybe look there. And there's some information on social media. Feel free to reach out, connect with me on social media if you'd like. Always happy to make new connections. So I want to talk to you a little bit about the training that we're going to do and what to expect here. So the trainings, depending on the course, are organized typically as a half day or a full day sessions. And I believe, we may play this a little bit by ear in terms of adding a little bit more time if we need to in sessions, but typically around 3 or 6 hours and then plus breaks, three for a half a day, 3 to 4, and up to 6 or so for a full day session with course breaks in between. We've got a simple lab environment. I'm a big proponent of not having you have to do a lot of setup for this. So for all the courses, I've tried to make it where you can just use what we call GitHub Code Spaces, which is a simple virtual environment. And all you have to have is a GitHub account and a browser. And it's just a couple of clicks to set things up. Try to do engaging visuals to help you intuitively understand the tech. What I mean by that, I use a lot of animations, a lot of pictures. We do a lot of hands-on labs so you can get the concepts in practice. Every course we do at Tech Skills Transformations is a hands-on. We talk about the concepts, we introduce it to you, give you ways to think about things, show you pictures, and then give you time to get your hands into the tech, to actually try some things, guide you through it. And then we'll have copies of the materials. You'll have a PDF of the slides. You'll have the labs afterwards. So you can go on and continue to experiment. Taking one of our courses is not meant to be the end point of it. It's the beginning point, because we want you to come out of this with the confidence and the skills so that you can work with the tech and then explore more on your own. I'm a big proponent of doing that sort of self-learning too after you've been introduced to the concepts and have some of the knowledge. Again, no experience in the tech necessary. And of course, any courses we do, live courses, you have a chance to do Q&A. We have some time, we can dive down into deeper topics, or maybe, talk about use cases and such as that. So that's kind of what to expect overall with the training. So let's talk about these 3 workshops that we've got coming up. First one is called Hands-On with Local LLMs, Tools and Techniques. Now, LLM stands for Large Language Models, and you probably know these as things like GPT or Chat GPT, where the chat is the chatbot on the front, but the GPT is the model on the back. But there are a lot of different models out there by folks like Meta, the Facebook group, and Google's put out theirs, and OpenAI, the people who do GPT. There are a lot of models available and a lot that you can use and download and run locally. Now, why would you want to run them locally? Well, think about things like having privacy, being able to experiment with them, being able to learn with them, that kind of thing, run on your own hardware, not have to pay a cost for it. So this course is all about helping you understand some of the tools, the techniques that you can use to run models locally. We'll be working with learning about Hugging Face. I have to say that Hugging Face.co, not .com, but .co, is like a GitHub for these large language models. It has all kinds of information about them, all kinds of ones to select from and download from. So in this course, what we're going to do is we're going to work with a couple of applications. One that is a graphical user interface, LM Studio, Language Model Studio, that will load models down from Hugging Face, and we'll see how to do things like how to run them locally in there, but also how do we interact with them? We'll be able to interact with them by working with their APIs. We'll do a little bit of programming through Python and such to interact with them and get queries. We'll also see how to work with them through chat interfaces and really start to get a sense of what all we can do locally there. We'll also use a tool called Ollama. Ollama is a simple command line application, and we'll be able to run models with that. Similar to how you might get stuff out of GitHub, you can pull models out of Hugging Face, and then you can spin things up from there very easily and have things running locally. So lots of opportunities to play with lots of different models that convert text, or models that take input and produce pictures or sound kinds of things in there. We'll get to play with those kinds of multimodal models well. We'll also see how to build our own chatbot. We'll actually use a Python toolkit called Streamlit to build an interface, a graphical interface with that. So this one is very cool, half-day session, but here's some example visuals from it, from the slides there. You can see we cover quite a bit in there, talking about LM Studio, developing with Streamlit, Hugging Face, different ones in there. These are examples of some of the slides we have. Again, I like lots of visuals in this, so I tried to build those in to the process. When we're looking at the labs with this one, we'll be talking about things like getting familiar with LM Studio and models, how to chat with models that we load up in the LM Studio, writing code to interface with it, working with models in Hugging Face. How do we go about navigating around Hugging Face, finding out information about models and such, using Ollama to run models locally, and even building a chat bot with Streamlit. So again, we're focused on getting you the learning, getting you the hands-on experience. And then after this, you'll be well equipped to go out and try running some models on your own, trying some things out, playing around with it, having fun with it. We want this to be a fun experience as well as a learning experience for you. So the hands-on generative AI here with local language models, just a half-day session, but to get you equipped with understanding what's out there, how to get it up and running, and so you can take it from there and try out any of the other models that you want. The next one we have is called Hands-on Gen AI from Neural Nets to Vector Databases. Now, this one is a more in-depth and both deep and broad uh, survey and introduction to generative AI topics. In this one is a full day session. And what we do from this one is we start out from the foundations of generative AI and talk about things like neural nets, neural networks. How do these networks are what we call neurons, which are modeled after neurons in your brain, but how do they take information and process it and get trained on it and figure out how to make decisions or predict the next word on it, predict the next token. And so we'll talk about all the things that make up and work with that make these large language models like GPT possible. We'll go through neural nets. We'll talk about how do we break text, or how do we encode text, or create tokenization. How do we break text down into tokens? And how do we turn it into what we call vector representations in a numeric form that we can store for neural networks to interact with? Computers work with numbers, not text. So we have to convert that in there. And then we'll talk about how that gets factored into vectors so that the language models can then compare them through different mathematical operations and such. Now, one of the goals I have with this, though, one of the things I try to hold to very closely here is not getting bogged down in the math. There's a lot of information out there, but there's a lot of the math operations and transformations and stuff that can really bog you down if you're trying to learn this stuff. And certainly there's more detail if you want to dive into it. But we're going to focus on just helping you understand what these different aspects are, what these different elements are. We'll look at things called vector databases, which give us a way to do what we call retrieval augmented generation, or RAG. This is where we can take our own documents, like our own PDFs or our own other kinds of information we have locally, and convert it into a form that it can be stored in these databases, and it becomes an additional source of information for querying with these large language models. You can query the large language model, but you can also then say, here's some additional context. Here's my PDFs converted into a form that you can search. And so what this does is it allows you to use your own local context and your own data to augment what the LLM has. So you can have more up-to-date things, you can have more localized knowledge, specialized knowledge in there, and we'll talk about that. We'll also talk about agents. AI agents are kind of the latest and greatest tools when it comes to working with these large language models. Large language models are basically word predictors or token predictors. They are trained on a large body of data, like the Copilot and such. GitHub Copilot is trained on the source repositories in GitHub. So they've been exposed to all this data and they've learned the relationships between it and they've stored that. But they're not thinking machines in terms of they are not able to go out and query the web and say, hey, here's the latest information on this. If you ask it what the current weather is supposed to be, it won't have that information because it's been trained on a certain data at a certain point in time there. So what the agents do is really to kind of enable these large language models to use tools like a web search, or tools like a something to parse data or something along those lines, or do computations, things that the LM doesn't do automatically. It gives them capabilities to use tool. And it also helps them be able to kind of do a form of reasoning to structure out and work out how to solve more complex problems in steps. So AI agents are very cool to work with and have the potential to be able to take sort of larger, big problems and break them down and farm them out to various AI agents there and work on them. So we'll talk about a number of those things. We'll talk about Gen AI versus machine learning versus deep learning, just to make sure you're clear on terminology, neural networks, how they work, how they're trained, converting the text into models using tokenizations, embeddings, large language models, how they're trained, how they work, vector databases, RAGs we talked about, and agents in there. So this is intended to be sort of a broad course, but again, giving you hands-on experience with each one of these. Here's some pictures from that one. We talk about the different kinds of things like the artificial neurons, embeddings, RAG, Hugging Face, vector databases, and so on. You can see again, we focus on giving you visuals that are helpful here and then getting you the hands-on experience as well. For this one, for the hands-on experience, we're talking about the labs, say, work with neural networks, experimenting with tokenization, embeddings, vectors, transformer models, using Ollama to run things locally, RAG and agents, all kinds of stuff. But again, these are programs mainly written in Python. You don't have to know Python, but written in Python that you can play with here. And hopefully, again, we'll get a few minutes here that I can talk to you about that and show you examples in the interfaces. Again, feel free to put any questions you have in the chat as we're going through here. Now, the third one we have coming up is Codium. Codium is an AI code completion, or what we might call a software development assistant. Basically, it's a coding assistant that uses large language models to predict code and to answer questions in the coding domain. If you know what GitHub Copilot is, and probably everybody's heard of that, it's an alternative to that. GitHub Copilot is the most well-known one, backed by the OpenAI large language models. But Codium has the advantages of being free. That is free for personal use. So you can install it, you can use it to do code completions, you can use it to chat with the large language model. So we'll be learning about how it works, what it can be used for, advantages and disadvantages. One of the things I do in my courses is I make sure to tell you the good and the bad. Try to give you the balanced perspective. Try to tell you it's suitable for this, but not as useful for that kind of thing. We'll be looking at using Codium across a wide variety of languages and frameworks. We'll talk about using, from everything from Python to JavaScript to Kubernetes to SQL to Go, all those kinds of things. So the examples I've built with this and the exercises are all around using it in different contexts. You don't have to know these things. This will just give you examples of being able to use it. We'll talk about how to use it to do code completion, generate testing, do documentation, and fix our code, all sorts of the survey of the capabilities that the tools have. And of course, we'll talk about how it compares to GitHub Copilot, because again, that's probably the most well-known one. So when we look at that one, here's some pictures from that one talking about things like how Codium can help. Has a built-in refactor functionality there, which allows it to do a lot of things like putting in nice comments in there, simplifying the code, optimizing it, test generation, working with the chat interface, and so on. Again, you can see we built in a lot of visuals, a lot of pictures here to help you understand the technology. Now, the labs for this one, we learn how to create prompts for Codium. It's important for us to learn how to create prompts the right way. By prompts, we mean how do we build up the context and the questions and the information we want to pass back across to these large language models to get the information. So we'll learn how to create good prompts, like we're talking to it in chat. How do I do an API for thing X? That's an example of that. And the more precise we can build the prompt, the better off we are. We'll use Codium to refactor existing code, explain and document code. Now, documenting doesn't just mean putting in comments. Documenting can be things like API documentation. It can be things like functional documentation. There's a lot that these tools can do, which goes beyond just the basic pieces of it. We have certainly things like putting in code comments and stuff, but we can leverage it sort of at multiple levels. We have the basic level, for example, of generating tests. But we can also leverage it to say, how would I do test-driven development? Or what are some other edge cases that I might want to test, that kind of thing. Teaching Copilot about updates, sorry, that should be Codium there, but using Codium to help with SQL. And so when we talk about SQL, we're using that as an example of a non-typical thing that you might not think about using a tool like Codium with. But on the other hand, if you need to do something with SQL and you're not up to speed on it, having this sort of generative AI tool to help you with it, to suggest code or answer your questions about it, can be a great asset to help you with that. So you don't have to know all the details. You don't have to go and dig through Stack Overflow articles or whatever to find it. We'll also talk about how do we help these tools like Codium and Copilot as well. How do we help them with up-to-date information? You know, one of the challenges with using a large language model or using a tool that's interfacing with a large language model is that it is only as up to date as of the time that it was last trained. For the GPT ones, for example, this typically means the latest I think was in April or August, maybe of 2023. So, you know, if you have a particular application or language or framework you want to use with these tools, and you're asking for information, you have to be cognizant of what version it thinks is current. That's one of the tricks I tell people to do when they start using this, is ask the tool, ask the AI, what version of X do you think is current? Because if it thinks something is the current version that's 2 years old, you're going to have to keep an eye out for what things might be deprecated or changed or so on. But there are ways to kind of help with that and also to get the AI to understand that there's a better new way to do this sort of thing. So we'll look at that as well. And we'll talk about using this AI Codium to generate regular expressions, do data mapping, and so on. These are things, again, maybe not things you do every day, and some people may really like doing regular expressions, but if you don't, it can be really nice to have an AI to help you with that. So we'll see how to use Codium to do that, to generate some simple data mappings. Maybe you need some test data or things, and you want to do some regular expression parsing as well. So lots of good, useful use cases for that. All right, so why attend here? Again, we've talked about some of this already. You know, get the skills and understanding you need in a single session, hands-on experience, learning best practices, tips and tricks, live training with an SME in there, and lots of live Q&A. You know, there are certainly, videos and such I know you can watch on these topics as well, but again, you're kind of subject to the when it was done and how up to date it may or may not be. One of the things we do at Tech Skills Transformation is we go through the course right before we teach it every time to make sure everything works and to make sure that we have up-to-date information, and also to make sure that we're up to speed. So if you ask you questions about things, we can either give you an answer or we know where to go to find an answer as well. So up-to-date content, simple environments to set up, training materials after the class, and understanding the good and bad. We're going to give you a balanced view of this. We're not going to tell you it's the best and only tool to use for this, but we want you to be comfortable enough with it so you can make your own call on it. All right, I'm going to stop there really quickly and just ask if there are any questions for a moment.
Yeah, questions can be posted in the chat or in Q&A session.
I don't think I see any, so if there are, feel free to put them into the chat or to come off mute there and let me know. I'll go ahead though at this point, since we've got a few minutes, I got through that faster than I thought. I'm going to go ahead and do a screen share and just show you around a little bit about what we're doing in some of these courses. These won't be the exact courses, but they'll be very similar to it. So let me go ahead and switch over. I've got a couple of code spaces here. And so I'll just show you a couple of things with this. So this one is the DIY Gen AI. This is the one where we talk about getting hands-on with things. Now, one of the things we've got here is I've got a process set up for you that you can go to connect to when you run this, and you'll be able to go and connect right into an instance of LM Studio, hopefully. maybe it's not going to work for me this time. The demo folks may not be, spirits may not be part there. I'll have to go back and look at that and see if it's not. All right, we'll come back to that part. But I can show you at least in the terminal piece here, I've got Olama downloaded. And Olama is a single executable here that we can do. We'll just tell Olama to start itself up. And so it's running now. And so it's ready to host and download these models. So let's go ahead and give it a second here. We'll just do Olama pull Pi 3 Mini. Now, what is Pi 3 Mini? Well, let's take a look here. I'll show you on a different tab. Let's go to Hugging Face. And if you go to Hugging Face and you search for Pi 3 Mini, so you can see we've got a couple of things here. These are models. If we search for Pi 3, we'll probably get a broader here, Microsoft Pi 3 Mini. This is a model put out by Microsoft, a large language model. Here's a summary about it. And so you've got some information. You can also have information with a thing called Transformers, which is a library. We'll get to play with this a little bit in the course to actually use this model and bring it in. But let's go back to our session here, and I'll tell it to go ahead and pull this model down. And what it's doing, it's getting files down, much like you might pull a Docker image or you might pull a GitHub repository. It's pulling it down locally. Now, all this is running in our CodeSpace environment. This is basically a two-click setup. There's a file that I'll have you with a button in it, and you'll click on that button, and it will spin this up for you. And when we have this now, so we've got a model running in there. One of the things we can do is we can actually, we create a chat application. So we create a chat application in the DIY Gen AI one, and this is using Streamlit, and it is actually loading up here. You can look closely here. Here's where it's using Olama, pulling in this model, Pi 3 Mini. So let's go ahead and run this and see it in action. I'm using the Streamlit. Streamlit is simply a library that is Python. I don't need that. And this is what it looks like when we're ready. This is what we're actually going to build in the class. One of the things, last thing we do. Let's see, what should we ask it? What is the height of the Empire State Building? Let's see if we can get an answer from that. And so it's going to go off, and it's using Olama in the background. You may be able to see this little running symbol up here. And it's going to go off and search that model that we downloaded. So this is all running locally in the code space here. And you can see now it's actually giving me answers back from that. So this is the kind of thing we'll do in this one. We'll get to play with models, run them locally in your code space, and see how to get them, how to find them in Hugging Face and play with it there. And in fact, if we go back here, you can see that it's got the models loaded. It was posting things to the chat and so on. So that's a very cool one, I think. I actually like that one a lot. It's simple to use, and we're going to play that in LM Studio in there. Let's take a look at another one here, generative AI for developers. This one is the deeper dive. I'll show you the neural network one we've got here. We've got a neural network implementation in Python. Now, you don't have to know what a neural network is, but it's a collection of these artificial things called neurons. And neurons are about passing data through and making decisions based off of input give to them. You think about the neurons in the brain connecting there. But one of the things that this is set up to do is to take a set of inputs. If you think of each of these rows here as training data, like 0, 0, 1, 1, 1, 1, and so on, then this is the output we want. So the idea is we're going to run this program to train this neural network to say, given these sets of output or sets of input data, this is the output. Now, if you're looking closely, you may notice that what we expect is that given like 0, 0, 1, we expect it to return a 0. Given 1, 1, 1, we expect it to return 1. So the idea is that for each one of these input sections or groups, we're actually going to expect it to return the first item in there. So when we play with this, what we'll see is that this will go through, it'll initialize it, it'll train itself. By training, we mean that it is learning to say, given this input data, Brent expects it to return this one, which is the first item in the list. And so we're going to try, it's going to adjust some values internally, what we call weights, to try to do that. So let me just show you what I mean here. So if I say Python and I start up the program, then it says randomly, it started off with just random weights. In other words, the strength of the connections between the neurons, right? The random weights in there. After it went through in training, you'll notice that it gave a much higher positive value, a higher weight to the first item. So that is in keeping with this idea that we want it to try to return, to try to predict a value, an output value that corresponds to the first element in the list. So now if I give it a set, let's say 1, 0, 1, notice that it predicted 0.97. What does that mean? It means that it predicted that the value would be close to 1 or 1, which is the first value we're in, because we trained it, when it trained it, it figured out that we wanted to have the actual the value that was first input. Now I can train it differently. I can say, okay, let's change it so that we do 0, 1, 0, 1, the second value in here. Now, if I go through and run this again, oh, actually, let me make sure I save it. That would help. So what am I doing? I'm telling it now I want it to train itself to take and predict the second value from the input set as the output. So now you can see that after it's trained itself, it comes out and says, hey, we'll predict the second one as being the higher value to again match what we expect. So now if I put in like 1, 0, 1, it predicts something that's closer to 0 to match that second value in there. So we'll learn about, neural network kind of as foundational pieces. We have lots of other things where we do tokens and embeddings and stuff, vector databases. We'll play with seeing the different embeddings. Let's see, another one we've got here. Let's play with this one. See if I can remember the syntax to start it up here. Vectors.py. I'm going to give it a model to play with. Bird case. I have to remember the syntax here. I think it's BERT base paste. See if I got that right. Yep. All right. So what do? I just told it to download a model where we can, which has information about stored words. Basically, what vectors are these representations internally of terms, of tokens, and also information about how they're related. So if I put in some words here that are closely related, let's say king, queen, and duck. We would expect that internally, when we're storing this information, we would see that the king and queen is more closely related, has a higher correlation, 0.6, higher than there, as opposed to queen and duck are 0.9. So the idea is that when this vector would take these words, it would convert it into series of numbers. These numbers are stored in these one-dimensional matrices or vectors, and that then captures how they're related to other things. So this is just another example we use. We're learning these concepts to help us understand how these things are related and how these large language models work. Lastly, let's take a look here at, let me find the Codium one. Here we go. Let's say this is Codium. This is again is a generative AI. Let's do a an example here. Typical little example I use in a lot of things. I'm going to create a program to check if a number is prime. Now notice what I've done. I've given it a name of a file that is prime.py. So it has a Python extension, so it should know it's using Python. And it's also got a sense from this and from the function that it is what it's trying to do. Notice the grayed out text, that's coming from Codium. So if I say tab, then it's going to go ahead and accept that. And then I've got other text suggestions. So I've got a full range of options here for a prime number function that I can just spin through and I can find the one that I like the best. We'll go with this one and hit tab. And all of a sudden I've got a function where I didn't even have to write any lines of code except a little bit on the header. Now, the cool thing is there's in Codium, you've got this refactor menu up here. And so I can say things like, let's just tell it to comment the code. Let's say we want to have it we want to help understand. So notice now it's produced comments that I can either accept or reject. So I'll go ahead and accept those. And all of a sudden I've got nicely commented code for that. I can also, let's see if we've got some other things here. Make this code faster and more efficient. Let's see if it comes up with anything. Yep, so it came up with a few things and it has simplified it a bit, so I can accept that. I can also tell it to, in the chat, Codium, this was the inline interface. So this is the idea, you're working in the editor, you're going through and you are typing code, working with it. And then as you're going through, you can also ask questions or you can have it do things for you. For example, I can say, generate test for the code. And let's see what it comes back with. It's giving me quite a few of things here. How would you design it? Here is, notice it gives me some information back. When you're in the chat interface, it's more like you're having a conversation with the code, or a conversation with another person. And it's giving me, says, hey, to generate the test, I would use the context from the labs MD, that's a labs document. Here's an example of how to do it. Here's some unit test. And I can even just take this and just insert it. And then I've got my unit test in there as well as with my function. And again, notice I really didn't have to write a lot of code. I just asked to produce it. All right, I'm going to jump back to our slides here and let us finish up. I know we have our schedule here for 45 minutes. Again, these are all the things, hopefully this will be useful to you. Again, trying to make sure that we provide you with the value of the hands-on experience, the live interactions, the labs, the hands-on labs, all the good stuff there. Here's some testimonials from some previous workshop attendees if you're interested. Generally we've gotten pretty good feedback on things and really have had a lot of happy customers have gone through this and have gotten a lot of good feedback on things as well. And here's just a quick link to our quick explanation of scheduled training. We do have a course coming up on GitHub Copilot next Friday, the 23rd. You want to sign up on that one. The other courses we just talked about are listed here. And on September 22nd, we have one about understanding GitHub security, all the aspects of securing GitHub from, scanning code to checking for secrets to updating your dependencies automatically, all kinds of interesting pieces there, pretty comprehensive on that. So I hope you can join us for these courses. I hope this has been useful, informative to you. I'm going to try to leave a few minutes here just in case we've got any questions, but that's all I've got today. So feel free to buzz in here with any questions you have. All right, I guess.
We'll just wait for a couple of minutes for questions to come up. I'll post the links in the chat also. And also we'll have 20% discount. You can use the code webinar. and get 20% discount.
Absolutely.
And also we have another upcoming GitHub Copilot. You can also announce that.
Yep, we have the GitHub Copilot one coming up next Friday, a week from today. So it'll be a full day course, and we'll get into some of the same things we talked about with Codium, but lots of examples of using GitHub Copilot hands-on, and learning how to use it for generating tests, documentation, all the good stuff. All right, Lena, do we have anything else we want to cover today?
No, I think we are all good.
Okay.
Yeah, done.
Thank you, everybody. I appreciate your time and hope to get to see you in one of the sessions.
Thank you all. Bye.
Bye.